Every single morning, before you are even properly awake, thousands of strangers you will never meet have already conspired to keep you alive. Someone grew the coffee, someone shipped it across an ocean, someone baked the bread, printed the packaging, drove the truck through the dark, stocked the shelf. None of them know you exist. None of them did it because they care whether you eat. And yet there it is, breakfast on your table, assembled by a vast invisible army that no king commanded and no committee planned. How? 250 years ago, a shy, absent-minded Scottish professor sat down to answer exactly that question, and the book he wrote quietly became the operating manual for the modern world. We call it economics now, and we treat it as a dry science of graphs and jargon. But strip that away, and the wealth of nations is something far stranger and more useful. An instruction manual for the machine you are living inside right now. The one that explains why you have food, why your job feels the way it does, and why, again and again, you get quietly squeezed. Most people have never read a page of it, yet its ideas run your life the way the rules of gravity run a falling stone. And here is the twist almost nobody tells you. The man everyone quotes as the patron saint of greed and free markets was actually a moral philosopher who did not trust businessmen at all, and who buried, in the middle of his masterpiece, a warning aimed squarely at you. This is Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations in about 20 minutes. The book is An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, published in 1776 by Adam Smith, the same year, by no accident, that a set of British colonies across the Atlantic declared their independence. It was a year for founding documents, and this was the founding document of modern economics. Smith was a professor in Scotland during a remarkable burst of genius we now call the Scottish Enlightenment, when a handful of thinkers in Edinburgh and Glasgow rebuilt how the West understood the mind, morality, and society. He was famously eccentric, so lost in thought that he once reportedly walked miles in his dressing gown without noticing where he was going. But here is the fact that changes how you should read every line. Adam Smith was not, by trade, an economist. That profession did not yet exist. He was a professor of moral philosophy, a man whose first great book was about human sympathy and conscience. He came to markets not as a cheerleader for wealth, but as a philosopher asking a moral question. How does a society of self-interested strangers manage to cooperate at all, and who ends up better or worse for it? That matters because for 250 years, Smith has been kidnapped, turned into a bumper sticker for unregulated greed, a mascot waved by people who have plainly never read him. The real Smith is subtler, warier, and far more interesting. He admired the market's power to feed millions, and in the same breath, he distrusted the merchants who profit from it. Hold both of those in your head at once, because the whole book lives in that tension, and almost every popular version of Smith you have ever heard keeps only the flattering half. Here is the whole book in one sentence. The Wealth of Nations is not a dusty textbook, but a still-running operating manual that explains why you have food to eat, why your work can leave you hollowed out, and why the market that feeds you will also, if you let it, quietly harvest you. Smith's real subject is not gold, or kings, or trade balances, the things everyone before him thought made a nation rich. His subject is labor, ordinary people making ordinary things, and the astonishing order that emerges when millions of them pursue their own small ends at once. He wants to know where prosperity actually comes from, how it multiplies, and what it costs the human beings caught inside the machine. And his answer, unfolded across nearly 1,000 pages, still describes the world outside your window with unsettling accuracy. We will walk it in 5 beats. First, the pin factory, and how the division of labor both makes you and traps you. Second, the butcher's dinner, and how naked self-interest ends up feeding total strangers. Third, the invisible hand, the most famous and most abused phrase he ever wrote. Fourth, the page his so-called fans always skip, where Smith stops praising the market and starts warning you about it. And fifth, what all of this means for you, standing inside the machine today as both a worker and a consumer. 5 beats, 1 shy Scottish professor, and a manual that has been running your economy since before your country was born. First beat. The pin factory. Smith opens his masterpiece not with kings or gold, but by walking us into a workshop that makes something almost comically small. Pins. And he does it to reveal the first secret of all modern wealth. Watch, he says, how a pin actually gets made. It is not one worker doing everything. Instead, one man draws out the wire, another straights it, a third cuts it, a fourth points it, a fifth grinds it at the top for receiving the head. On and on it goes, the making of a single pin split into 18 distinct operations shared among a handful of people. A lone worker doing all of it might struggle to make 1 pin a day. But 10 workers, each doing one narrow task, could make upwards of 48,000 pins in a single day. That staggering multiplication is what Smith calls the division of labor, and it is the engine of every rich society. 250 years later, that same engine is everywhere. It is Henry Ford's assembly line. It is every app on your phone built by teams who each touch one sliver of the code. It is the gig economy slicing whole jobs into tasks you can summon in seconds. But Smith, being a moral philosopher, saw the bill attached. A man who spends his whole life performing one simple operation, he warned, has no occasion to exert his understanding, and generally becomes as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. There it is, the price of the pin factory. The very system that makes us all richer can, if we are not careful, hollow out the person doing the work. That ache has a modern name: burnout, the feeling of being a replaceable part in a machine you did not design. Second beat, the butcher's dinner. If the pin factory explains how we make so much, the next question is stranger. How does any of it reach you? You did not raise the cow, grind the flour, or brew the beer on your table tonight. Complete strangers did, and here is the unsettling part: they did none of it for love of you. Smith says it in the single most famous sentence he ever wrote. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Read that again, because it is doing something radical. The baker does not rise at 4 in the morning because he cares whether you go hungry. He does it to earn a living, to feed his own family, to make money. And yet, this is the magic. You get your bread anyway. Your dinner is delivered not by anyone's kindness, but by everyone's self-interest, braided together into a web of exchange. Smith's insight is that a market needs no central planner, no benevolent king rationing loaves, no one in charge at all. Millions of people, each chasing their own private gain, unknowingly organize themselves into a system that feeds a whole civilization. The coffee, the bread, the milk on your breakfast table this morning pass through the hands of thousands of people you will never meet and who never once thought about you. What ties them to you is not affection, it is exchange, the quiet, world-spanning deal in which I get what I want by helping you get what you want. It is, when you stop to see it, one of the most extraordinary cooperative acts our species has ever pulled off, and it runs on no one's goodwill at all. Third beat, the invisible hand. This is the phrase everyone knows, printed on neckties and quoted in boardrooms, and it is almost always misused. So let us go to the source. Smith is describing a merchant who invests his money at home rather than abroad, purely for his own security and profit. And Smith notes that in doing so, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. That is the whole idea, and notice how carefully hedged it is. An individual chasing private profit can, without meaning to, end up serving the public good. The butcher feeds the town while only trying to feed himself. It is a genuine and beautiful observation. But here is what almost nobody tells you. In a book of nearly 1,000 pages, the phrase "invisible hand" appears exactly once. Once. It is not the thundering thesis of the whole work. It is a single, modest, carefully qualified remark. Smith never claimed the hand always works, or that markets are magically perfect, or that greed is automatically good. Those are additions bolted on centuries later by people who wanted a founding saint for unregulated capitalism. The real Smith says something much humbler, that self-interest can, under the right conditions, produce order no one designed. Can, not always will. It is an observation, not a religion, a description of when markets work, not a promise that they always do. And Smith knew better than anyone the conditions under which that hand curls into a fist, which is exactly where the next beat takes us, into the page his loudest fans would very much prefer you skipped. Fourth beat, the page they skip. Here is the great irony of Adam Smith's afterlife. The people who wave his name to argue that business should be left completely alone have almost never read what he actually said about businessmen, because Smith did not trust them. He was, remember, a moral philosopher, and he watched the merchants and manufacturers of his age with a cold, clear eye. Listen to what he warns. People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some contrivance to raise prices. Sit with that. The father of free market economics is telling you that whenever businessmen in the same industry gather, even for a friendly dinner, the natural drift of the conversation is toward colluding against you, the consumer, to fix prices and pad their profits. This is not a throwaway aside. Smith returns again and again to the danger of monopoly, of merchants capturing the law, of a business class bending government to serve itself at the public's expense. He wanted competition precisely because he distrusted the powerful men that competition keeps in check. Now look at your own world, the handful of platforms that quietly settle on their take rates, the cartels, the price-fixing scandals, the lobbyists writing the very rules meant to restrain them. Smith saw all of it coming in 1776. To read him honestly is to understand that he was never a cheerleader for the rich and powerful. He was their skeptic. The market, in his eyes, was a tool for the public, and it needed guarding against the very people most eager to game it. Reading Smith and skipping this warning is like quoting a fire safety manual while lighting the match. Fifth beat. You standing inside the machine. Strip away the 18th century prose, and here is what Smith leaves in your hands, because you live inside his book every single day, wearing two hats at once. First, you are a worker. The division of labor that made the world rich also made most of us specialists. One narrow task, in one narrow slot on some vast production line, whether that line makes cars or code or content. So Smith's question becomes personal. Are you the interchangeable fifth man who only grinds the point of the pin, easily swapped for the next pair of hands? Or have you built a skill, a judgment, a craft that is genuinely hard to replace? In an age of automation, that is not an abstract worry. It is your survival strategy. Second, you are a consumer. Every day you feast on the abundance the invisible hand pours out. Cheaper, faster, and more than any king in Smith's time could dream of. But carry his warning with you as you do. The market will organize itself to serve you, yes, but it will never automatically take your side. Someone, somewhere, is always tempted toward that quiet conspiracy against the public, that little contrivance to raise prices. Smith's gift is not a lullaby that everything works out. It is a pair of clear eyes, gratitude for the machine that feeds you, and vigilance toward the people who run it. That is the whole inheritance. A book from 1776 that is not a museum piece, but a live wire, still explaining why you eat, still explaining why your work can wear you down, and still quietly warning you not to be harvested by the very system that keeps you fed. So what does all of it add up to? On the surface, The Wealth of Nations is a 1,000-page treatise on trade, wages, rent, and money, the founding text of a whole science. But underneath the graphs it would later inspire, Adam Smith is telling one continuous human story, and every beat we walked is a chapter of it. He begins in the pin factory, showing how splitting work into pieces unleashes almost unlimited wealth, and quietly costs the worker something of his mind. He moves to the butcher's dinner, revealing that this whole vast cooperation runs not on kindness, but on self-interest, braided into exchange. He offers the invisible hand, a single modest observation that private gain can sometimes serve the public good, and not the blank check for greed it has been twisted into. And then, crucially, he turns and warns you. The powerful will conspire against the public whenever they can, and a market left entirely to them will be rigged. Put those together and you get the real Adam Smith, not the mascot of unlimited greed, but a moral philosopher marveling at a machine that feeds millions while refusing to look away from what it costs and who it corrupts. That balance is the whole point. The Wealth of Nations endures not because it worships the market, but because it sees the market whole, its staggering power to create, and its permanent temptation to exploit. 250 years on, both halves of that vision are still running, right outside your door and inside your paycheck. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Adam Smith teaches you to see the water you swim in. Most of us move through the economy the way a fish moves through the sea, totally surrounded by it, never once noticing it is there. So tomorrow morning, when your coffee is waiting and your bread is on the shelf, pause for 1 second and see the miracle Smith saw. The thousands of unknown strangers whose self-interest, not their love, just fed you. That single act of noticing changes how you stand in the world. It turns invisible systems visible, and things you can see, you can begin to question. Then carry the second half, his warning, everywhere you go. When a company tells you a price rise is simply the market, when an industry insists it should be left entirely to police itself, remember that the founder of free market thought expected exactly those people to conspire against you the moment your back was turned. Smith does not ask you to hate the market or to worship it. He asks for something harder and wiser: clear eyes. Be grateful for the astonishing machine that feeds you, and be vigilant toward the hands that run it. Ask of your own work whether you are building something hard to replace. Ask, as a consumer and a citizen, who exactly benefits when someone tells you the system should simply be trusted. That double vision, wonder and wariness at once, is the real inheritance Adam Smith left you, and it costs nothing to start using it the very next time you open your wallet. Adam Smith spent 17 years and nearly 1,000 pages making one quiet, radical case: that the wealth of a nation is not its gold or its kings, but the ordinary labor of ordinary people, and that the machine which multiplies that labor must be watched as closely as it is admired. He gave us the pin factory and the butcher's dinner, the invisible hand and the warning we keep forgetting, and asked us to hold all of it at once: the miracle and the menace, the abundance and the catch. If this walk through the wealth of nations gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we leave the workshops of Scotland for the ballrooms and railway platforms of Imperial Russia, and Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. A woman socially executed for an affair half the room is also having, and one of the most modern stories ever told about public shame and the price of being seen. And tell me in the comments, in your own working life, do you feel more like the fifth man who only grinds the point of the pin, easily replaced, or like someone who has built something genuinely hard to swap out? I read every reply.